Welcome to Lost Histories 360. Every story has another side. Channel: Lost Histories 360. Target audience: English-speaking adults, 25 plus, archaeology/biblical mystery fans. TDS voice. NUS intramural duration target: 60 minutes, 8,500 to 9,500 words, 135 WPM. Style: archaeological philological thriller. Bart Ehrman meets Indiana Jones. No ancient aliens, no Daniken, no Nibiru. Episode positioning: foundation episode for the Watchers/Goliath arc. Welcome to Lost Histories 360. 2,602 times. That's how many times the word Elohim appears in the Hebrew Bible, and almost every time in the plural. Open your Bible. Page 1. Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26. Read it slowly. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Let us make, plural, our image, plural, our likeness, also plural. If the Bible teaches that God is one, that God is alone, that no other exists, then who was he speaking to in that verse? Whose voice answered him? Who were that? Us? Theologians give 3 answers. Rabbis give 2. Archaeologists give 1. And none of them is the answer you were taught in church. What you are about to hear in the next 60 minutes is written in your Bible, in the first 4 Hebrew words of the first sacred book of the West. It is written on clay tablets that still sit in the British Museum in London, in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls at the Israel Museum. But nobody ever read them aloud to you. This is the story of the gods who wrote the world 1,000 years before Genesis rewrote it. The story of the real Anunnaki, not the ancient aliens of cable television, the ones in the tablets, the ones who were there when humanity first learned to write, and the story of how a small exiled people in Babylon took that entire pantheon, turned it upside down, and reorganized it under a single throne. The rabbis knew, but they did not write it down. Today we are going to. There is a word in the Hebrew Bible that appears 2,602 times. 2,602. It is the most used word in the entire Jewish sacred text. That word is Elohim, and it is plural. In Hebrew, the suffix im is the masculine plural ending, just as cherub in the singular becomes cherubim in the plural, just as seraph becomes seraphim. Grammar: plain, indisputable. Eloah in the singular means God, one single divinity. It appears about 60 times, almost all of them in the book of Job. Elohim, in the plural, literally means gods, and it appears 2,602 times. In most passages, the Bible attaches a singular verb to Elohim. Elohim created, Elohim spoke, Elohim saw. Translators say, see. Here Elohim functions as a singular, and they are right, sometimes. But in other passages, the verb is also plural, and that is where things get complicated. Genesis 1, verse 26. We already read it. Let us make man. Genesis 3, verse 22. After Adam and Eve eat from the forbidden tree, God says, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil." One of us, plural. Genesis 11, verse 7. Tower of Babel. Humanity is building toward the sky, and someone above says, "Come, let us go down, and let us confound their language." Let us go down, plural. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. The prophet is in a vision, seeing the throne, and God asks, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" For us, plural. For verses, for plurals. And these are not the only ones. For 2,000 years, translators had to decide what to do with this grammar, and most of them chose, "We leave it as it stands, and we explain it theologically." The official Christian church explanation has 3 versions. We are going to take them one by one, because each one hides a problem. The rabbis knew, but they did not write it down. Theory number 1, the plural of majesty. The most common explanation: God is so great, so glorious, that he speaks of himself in the plural, the way kings do. We, the king, decree. Royal plural, plural of majesty. The problem is that biblical Hebrew does not use this form for human kings. When King David speaks in the Old Testament, he speaks in the singular. So do Saul, Solomon, Hezekiah, every monarch. Nobody says we reign. The plural of majesty exists in modern Hebrew. It exists in French. It exists in Victorian English. But it does not exist in ancient biblical Hebrew for ruling kings. The most prestigious grammarians of biblical Hebrew, Paul Juan and Takamitsu Muraoka, explain it clearly in their reference grammar, published by the Pontifical Biblical Institute of Rome. The plural of majesty is not a feature of classical Hebrew for referring to human rulers. Theory 1 fails. Theory number 2, the Trinity. Christianity developed the doctrine of the Trinity in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries after Christ. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 3 persons, 1 God. And so, when Christian theologians read, "Let us make man," they said, of course, those are the 3 persons speaking to each other. The problem is simple. Genesis was written 1,000 years before Christ. At the earliest, the final editor worked in the 6th century before Christ. The Hebrew scribes who carved Naaseh Adam into the tablet had no concept of the Trinity. It is anachronistic by 1,000 years. Serious theologians today acknowledge this. The Trinity may be a valid Christian reading after the fact, but it cannot be the original meaning of the text. Theory 2 fails. Theory number 3, the divine assembly, the heavenly court. This is the one most modern scholars accept, the one that the most learned rabbis suspected for centuries, and the one that the official church never taught from the pulpit. It goes like this. When God says, "Let us make man," he is speaking to a court of subordinate divine beings. An assembly, like a king surrounded by his council, Yahweh as supreme chief, and a retinue of lesser gods around him. If this theory is correct, it changes everything you thought you knew. And here is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because if the Bible speaks of an assembly of gods, then the Sumerians had already written about that same assembly 1,000 years earlier, with different names. And those names begin with a word that today is hard to pronounce without sounding crazy. Those names are Anunnaki. Forget, for 5 minutes, everything you have ever seen on cable television. Forget ancient astronauts. Forget Nibiru. Forget extraterrestrial gold miners. All of that is garbage invented in 1976. Let us go to the real tablets, to the clay, to the cuneiform. Anunnaki, in Old Sumerian, is written Anunnakini. Its etymology was confirmed by Samuel Noah Kramer, the father of modern Sumerology, in his book, The Sumerians, published in 1963 by the University of Chicago Press. Anunnaki means the sons of the Godin, and was the god of the sky, the father of the pantheon. The Anunnaki were his descendants, the gods who governed the cosmos. They did not come from heaven to earth in a spaceship. The word does not mean those who came down. Somebody invented that translation in 1976. We will get to that chapter. The Anunnaki were the pantheon of gods of the Sumerian civilization, the first civilization with writing in human history. They emerged in southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is today Iraq, around the year 3500 before Christ. And they were written down in clay tablets for the first time around 2500 before Christ. The 10 principal ones were these: and the sky, father of the gods; Enlil, air and storm, king of the pantheon after it; his city, Nippur; Enki, fresh water and wisdom, the creator of the human in the myth of Atrahasis; his city, Eridu, the first city in the world; Ninhursag, the Mother Earth, co-creator alongside Enki; Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Her star was Venus. The Babylonians called her Ishtar. Utu, the sun god. The Akkadians called him Shamash. His city, Sippar. Nana, the moon. The Akkadians called him Sin. His city, Uar, the city of Abraham. Marduk, the god who eventually became king of the Babylonian gods. Nergal and Ereshkigal, the twins of the underworld. These 10 names are written on thousands of tablets preserved in the most important museums in the world. They are confirmed data, pure archaeology. And for the Sumerians, each of these gods literally was a celestial body. Inanna was Venus. Utu was the sun. Nana was the moon. It was not a metaphor. It was not a symbol. In the Sumerian mind, the god and the planet were the same divine entity. This is important. Remember it. Because in 25 minutes, when we talk about tablet via 243 at the Pergamon Museum of Berlin. It will be what resolves the entire Sitchin controversy. But for now, hold on to this. The Anunnaki existed. They were gods. They were not aliens. In 1,000 years before Genesis, someone had already written down how those gods created the human being. And when a clerk at the British Museum read that tablet in 1872, he stood up from his desk, ran around the room, and something happened to him. Something that marked the birth of modern biblical archaeology. The 3rd of December, 1872. London. Grey afternoon, English winter. The British Museum. The Department of Assyrian Antiquities. A 32-year-old man, thick beard, fitted waistcoat, sits down at a broken clay tablet that arrived a few weeks earlier from Nineveh. He is a banknote engraver for the Bank of England. He is not an archaeologist. He has no university degree. But in his spare time, for the past 10 years, he has taught himself to read cuneiform. His name is George Smith. The tablet bears the number K.3375. Today we know it is part of Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But in 1872, nobody yet knows what it says. Smith begins to decipher, line by line. The cuneiform symbols, those wedge-shaped marks made by pressing a reed stylus into wet clay, are practically illegible to the untrained eye. Smith reads them the way you read a newspaper, and then he reaches the central passage. A man, a god, orders him to build a boat. He gathers his family and the animals. A flood covers the earth. The boat lands on a mountain. The man releases a dove, which returns. He releases a raven, which does not return. He sacrifices to the gods. Smith stops. He reads it again. He has not made a mistake. He is reading it correctly. It is the flood, Noah's flood. But the tablet is 1,000 years older than Moses, older than Genesis, older than the Hebrew people. Wallace Budge, who was there as Smith's colleague at the British Museum, recorded what happened. He wrote it in a book published in 1925, titled The Rise and Progress of Assyriology. Page 153. I will read you the exact words. Smith jumped up and rushed about the room in a great state of excitement, and, to the astonishment of those present, began to undress himself. He started to undress. George Smith, banknote engraver, in the British Museum, in 1872, because he had just read the biblical flood on a tablet 1,000 years older than the Bible. Today, serious historians like David Damrosch, in his book, The Buried Book from 2006, doubt that Smith reached total nudity. He probably just took off his jacket and tie out of emotional heat. The image of complete undressing is Victorian exaggeration. But what is confirmed, documented, beyond any doubt, is this. On the 3rd of December, 1872, Smith gave a public lecture at the Society of Biblical Archaeology of London. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, William Ewart Gladstone, was in the audience. Smith read his translation. The room fell silent. And when he finished, the Daily Telegraph newspaper paid £1,000 sterling, which today would be more than 100,000, to fund an expedition to Nineveh to recover the missing tablets. Smith traveled. He found more fragments. In 1876, at the age of 36, he died of dysentery in Aleppo, Syria, with his notebook of translations by his side. That was the man who broke the theological monopoly over Genesis. With no degree, no credentials, only 10 years of self-teaching. And when he read the next line, he knew he was changing history. Question: in what year did George Smith decipher the Sumerian flood? Option A, 1852. Option B, 1872. Option C, 1892. Option D, 1902. We do not reveal the answer. Comment A, B, C, or D below. The confirmation comes in the next trivia break. Smith was reading a tablet, but that tablet came from a library, and that library came from a king. The king's name was Ashurbanipal. He ruled Assyria between the years 668 and 627 before Christ. He was one of the most learned kings of the ancient world. He could read cuneiform, which was extremely rare for a monarch. He ordered his scribes to collect every known text of the Mesopotamian world. In the city of Nineveh, capital of his empire, he built the greatest library of antiquity, 30,000 clay tablets, poems, myths, astronomical treatises, diplomatic letters, medical recipes, contracts, lists of gods, all written in Akkadian and Sumerian, the two classical languages of Mesopotamia, all in cuneiform, all on clay. In 612 before Christ, Nineveh fell. The armies of the Medes and Babylonians burned the city. The palace of Ashurbanipal went up in flames. And the fire, paradoxically, is what saved the tablets. Because dry clay is fragile, but baked clay becomes eternal. The fire fired the tablets. It turned them into ceramic. And when British archaeologists, led by Austin Henry Layard and Hormizd Rassam, excavated the site between 1847 and 1863, they found the 30,000 tablets intact. They took them to London, to the British Museum. There arrived the tablet K.3375. And there, the flood was waiting, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and something even more disturbing, something called Atrahasis, a text from 1,700 years before Christ, 400 years older than Moses, 1,000 years older than the final edition of Genesis. And in that text, the Anunnaki gods create the human, with clay, with divine blood, with the same method, in the same narrative order, with the same purpose, 1,000 years before Genesis. Same text. The text is called Atrahasis because that is the name of its protagonist. In Akkadian, Atrahasis means extraordinarily wise. He is the Babylonian Noah, the one who survives the flood. But before the flood, the same text tells how humans were created, and that is where everything starts to fall into an uncomfortable place. Listen to the story. Tablet 1, lines 210 to 215, translated by Wilfred Lambert and Alan Millard, published by Oxford University Press in 1969. The tablet sits in the British Museum, inventory number BM 78941. The great Anunnaki gods, those who ruled the cosmos, had lesser gods in their service. The Igigi, those lesser gods worked the earth. They dug canals. They built dikes. They sweated under the sun. One day, the Igigi had had enough. They broke their tools. They went to the palace of Enlil, the king of the pantheon, to protest. Enlil convened an assembly. To the assembly came in Enki, Ninhursag. They deliberated, and Enki, the god of wisdom, proposed a solution. "Let us create a new being," said Enki. "Let it dig the canals for us. Let it work the earth. Let it serve the gods." Ninhursag asked, "Of what shall we make it?" And Enki answered with a line that, when you hear it, will send a chill down your spine. I will read it to you literally, as Lambert translated it. "With the flesh and the blood of a god, Nintu shall mix clay. God and human shall be firmly bound together in clay." They sacrificed a god named Weila. They killed him. They took his blood. They took his flesh. They mixed it with clay, and they shaped the first human. Open your Bible again. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Yahweh God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Move back and forth between the texts. Atrahasis, clay plus the flesh and blood of a god. Genesis, dust plus divine breath. Atrahasis, the gods needed servants. Genesis, Yahweh sets the man to tend the garden. Atrahasis, Enki and Ninhursag as creator couple. Genesis, let us make in the plural. 1,000 years before Genesis. Same material, same method, same function. I am not saying this is plagiarism. Listen carefully. I am not saying that. I am saying there is an echo so precise that scholars have spent 100 years trying to explain it. And the current consensus is that there was contact. Literary, cultural, theological. I will explain how that contact happened. But first, we have to talk about another list. A list that, when you compare it to Genesis chapter 5, will dismantle everything you thought you knew about the biblical patriarchs. In the Ashmolean Museum of Oxford, there is an object the size of an adult hand. It is a prism of baked clay with 4 faces covered in Sumerian cuneiform. Its inventory number is AN1923.444. Scholars call it WB 444 after its discoverers Weld and Blundell. It is known as the Sumerian King List. It was composed around the year 2000 before Christ. It is a document that claims to list every king of Sumer from the beginning of the world until the 18th century before Christ. The beginning of the text says, in the translation by Thorkild Jacobson, University of Chicago, 1939, when kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. Kingship descended from heaven. That is the first line. And then, the text lists 8 kings. 8 kings before the flood. Elohim reigned in Eridu 28,800 years. Alander reigned in Eridu 36,000 years. Enmingalana reigned in Bad Tibera 43,200 years. Enmingalana reigned in Bad Tibera 28,800 years. Demusid the shepherd reigned in Bad Tibera 36,000 years. Ensapadzadana reigned in Larik 28,800 years. Enmindarana reigned in Sapar 21,000 years. Ubartuda reigned in Shurapak 18,600 years. Total, 241,200 years. Obviously symbolic. Nobody serious thinks Elohim lived 28,800 actual years. They are sacred numbers, probably based on Babylonian sexagesimal mathematics. 60 was the magic number. Every reign is a multiple of 60. But notice something. There are 8 kings. Before the flood. 8. Now open Genesis chapter 5. It is the genealogy of the patriarchs from Adam to Noah. Adam lived 930 years. Seth lived 912 years. Enosh lived 905 years. Kenan lived 910 years. Mahalalel lived 895 years. Jared lived 962 years. Enoch lived 365 years and was taken by God. Methuselah lived 969 years. 8 antediluvian patriarchs. Same number, same temporal location. Both schemes end with a descendant who survives the flood. Atrahasis in Sumer, Noah in the Bible. But there is more. Look carefully. The 7th king of the Sumerian King List is named Enmindarana. He reigned in Sapar, the city of the sun god Shamash. And in other cuneiform texts, Enmindarana was the king whom the gods carried up to heaven to learn the celestial secrets, the art of divination, the solar calendar, the mysteries of the stars. Now look at Genesis 5, verse 24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch does not die. He disappears. God takes him. The 7th biblical patriarch ascended to learn the divine secrets. Exactly like Enmindarana, the 7th Sumerian king. The Norwegian scholar Helga Kvanvig published an entire book on this in 1988, titled Roots of Apocalyptic, the Mesopotamian background of the Enoch figure. Kvanvig's conclusion, with academic consensus today, is that the biblical Enoch directly inherited attributes from Enmindarana, the 7th position, the ascent, the transmission of secrets, the city of the sun, same number, same position, same destiny. It is not coincidence. It cannot be. The Sumerian list is older. And here is where the viewer begins to understand why the church, for 2,000 years, preferred that you did not read this. Because if the 8 biblical patriarchs reproduce the structure of the 8 Sumerian kings, and if the 7th in both lists ascends to heaven, then Genesis was not born in a vacuum. It was born in dialogue with an earlier text. And 1,000 years before Genesis, that earlier text already existed. But there is one person who took all of this evidence, mixed it with lies, and sold a toxic version to the world. His name is Zacharias Sitchin, and he sold 30 million books by lying. Question: what does the word Anunnaki really mean in Sumerian? Option A: those who came from the planet Nibiru. Option B: the sons of the god in the sky. Option C: the giants of the flood. Option D: the guardians of the temple. We do not reveal the answer. Sitchin or the scholars? Drop your vote in the comments. The 11th of July, 1920. Baku, Azerbaijan. A Jewish child is born to a Russian family. They name him Zachariah. His surname, Sitchin. 2 years later, the family emigrates to the British Mandate of Palestine. Zachariah grows up there, learns Hebrew, reads the Bible, later emigrates to London. At the London School of Economics, he studies economics. Not archaeology, not philology, not Assyriology, economics. He finishes his studies. He moves to New York. He works as a journalist. He marries. He has children. Up to this point, an ordinary life. But somewhere between the 1960s and the 1970s, Sitchin becomes obsessed with the Sumerian tablets. He does not speak Sumerian fluently. He cannot read cuneiform without help. But he has an intuition. He believes he is going to solve something that the professional Assyriologists, with their doctorates from Harvard and Yale, missed. In 1976, he publishes a book titled The 12th Planet. Stein and Day, first edition in English. His thesis is revolutionary, and it is false. Sitchin says, the Anunnaki are an extraterrestrial race. They came from a 12th hidden planet of the solar system called Nibiru. That planet crosses Earth's orbit every 3,600 years in an elongated elliptical orbit. The Anunnaki came looking for gold to save the atmosphere of Nibiru. They created humans as genetic slaves to work the African mines. All of it written in the Sumerian tablets. Only nobody else managed to translate them correctly. The book sold, and sold, and sold. Over the following 30 years, Sitchin published 6 more books in the Earth Chronicles series. In total, he sold approximately 30 million copies in 25 languages. The figure is confirmed by his obituary in the New York Times, published on the 11th of October, 2010, the day after he died. 30 million books, built on a mistranslation. Because listen to this, carefully, point by point. First, the word Anunnaki. Sitchin claimed it means those who came from heaven to earth. False. We already saw it. It means the sons of the Godin. Basic Sumerian etymology. It is in the Sumerian Dictionary of the University of Pennsylvania. Any first-year Assyriology student knows it. Second, the word Nibiru. Sitchin claimed it names a 12th hidden planet. The word Nibiru does exist in cuneiform texts. It appears 8 times in the astronomical catalog Mul.Apin, which scholars date around 1,000 years before Christ. But it does not mean hidden planet. It means crossing point, and it refers to Jupiter or to the god Marduk in celestial motion. The scholar who proved this with rigor was Michael Heiser. He held a doctorate in Hebrew and Semitic Studies, University of Wisconsin, year 2004. He published an academic paper titled The Myth of a Sumerian 12th Planet, along with a complete website with the refutation line by line. The website is sitchiniswrong.com. It is still online. Third, the hypothesis of the planet itself. NASA, through David Morrison, senior astronomer at the Ames Research Center, denied it explicitly in 2009 and again in 2012 when the Nibiru myth merged with the pseudo-Mayan end-of-the-world prophecy. A planet of the size Sitchin postulates, crossing Earth's orbit, would be visible to the naked eye for decades before its passage. There is not a single serious astronomer in the world who supports it. Fourth, the gold mines. No Sumerian, Akkadian, or Babylonian text mentions gold as the motive for human creation. Atrahasis says clearly, humans were created to dig canals and work the land. Gold, 0. Genetic engineering, 0. Spaceships, 0. Sitchin did not hide a truth. He sold a fantasy, a lucrative fantasy built on a truth that does exist, but that he failed to understand. He lied, and he sold 30 million books on that lie. Do not feel bad if you believe Sitchin. Many people did. So did I, when I first started researching this topic. The History Channel amplified his ideas for a decade with the program Ancient Aliens, starting in 2010. And that is the version of the Anunnaki that reached the world. But the real academic version, the one in the tablets, is different. And it is more disturbing than Sitchin's fantasy, because it does not need aliens. The Sumerian gods are humans. They are gods. They are the background against which the most influential monotheistic religion in history was built. And now that we have cleared away the lie, let us return to the truth. Specifically, to a small square clay tablet, sitting in a display case at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, with inventory number VA 243. Because that tablet is the final proof of who was right. Pergamon Museum of Berlin, Hall of the Ancient Near East. Illuminated display case. A clay tile the size of a palm, with the impression of a cylinder seal in relief. Inventory number, VA 243. Old Akkadian period, around the year 2300 before Christ. The scene on the tablet shows a central figure seated on a throne. Around it, several humanoid figures in a posture of presentation or reverence. And in the upper left corner, what triggered the entire controversy, a disc with 11 radiant points or stars surrounding it. Total, 12 elements. Sitchin, in his 1976 book, claimed that this was a representation of the solar system. 12 bodies, the 9 then known planets, plus the sun, plus the moon, plus the secret 12th planet, Nibiru. Archaeological proof, according to him, that the Sumerians knew the complete solar system, including a planet that modern astronomers had not yet detected. It seems solid. It sounds convincing. At a glance, it even seems to match the image. But no, the Sumerologists, the professional Assyriologists who have devoted their careers to reading these tablets, say something different. The iconography of discs with radiant points does not represent the solar system. It represents astral gods of the pantheon. Remember what I told you at the beginning. For the Sumerians, each god was its planet. Inanna was Venus. Utu was the sun. Nanna was the moon. When Mesopotamian sculptors wanted to symbolize the divine assembly, they drew stars. An 8-pointed star was Inanna-Ishtar. A crescent was Nanasin. A solar disk was Utu Shamash. Tablet VA 243 does not show planets. It shows the assembly of the principal gods of Mesopotamia. Each point is a god. 12 gods. Sumerian astronomers knew 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, plus the sun, plus the moon. 7 celestial bodies. Never 12. The idea that the Sumerians had a complete heliocentric catalog with hidden planets is anachronistic. It did not exist. Michael Heiser put it clearly. I quote, "The word Nibiru does exist in cuneiform texts, but none of them say what Sitchin claims. Nibiru means crossing point, and it applies to Jupiter or Marduk in celestial motion. There is no 12th planet." Sitchin invented a translation that does not appear in any Sumerian or Akkadian dictionary. End of story. Now then, what is Tablet VA 243? A cultic scene, a representation of the divine assembly. 12 major gods. Standard Akkadian iconography. Nothing more, nothing less. And here is where the story takes its definitive turn. Because if the tablet shows a divine assembly of 12 gods, then the Sumerians had a heavenly court, an assembly, a council, presided over by a supreme god, surrounded by subordinate gods. And if that is true, the question that comes to your mind is unavoidable. Does the Bible also have a divine assembly? And the answer is yes. It is written. It is in the Psalms. It is in Job. It is in Deuteronomy. It is in the caves of Qumran. And when you hear it, you will never read the Bible the same way again. Psalm 82, verse 1, Hebrew text. I will read it to you the way it sounds in the original language. Elohim nitzav b'yad el, b'karev Elohim yishpat. Literal translation, word by word. Elohim stands in the assembly of El, in the midst of the Elohim. Judges. God stands in the assembly of El, in the midst of the gods he judges. Read it again, because this is the Hebrew Masoretic text. This is not a Christian translation taking liberties. This is not the commentary of a medieval rabbi. This is what the Hebrew scroll says, verse by verse. God stands in the assembly of the gods, and he judges among them. Keep going. Verse 6 of the same psalm. Ani amarti, Elohim Adam, Uvni Elin Kolkum. I said, you are gods and sons of the Most High, all of you. It is not poetry. It is not metaphor. The text says Elohim Adam. Gods are you. Second person plural. Plural subject. Plural verb. And do you know who else quoted this verse, word for word, according to the New Testament? Jesus. John, chapter 10, verse 34. Jesus is being accused of blasphemy by the religious leaders, and he replies with a rhetorical question, is it not written in your law? I said, you are gods? He himself quotes Psalm 82, verse 6, and he uses it as an argument. If the sacred text calls others gods, says Jesus, then why are you scandalized when I call myself the Son of God? Listen carefully. Jesus quotes a psalm that speaks of the assembly of gods and uses it as authority. This is not the theory of a rebel scholar. This is in the Christian sacred text, in the 4 Gospels. In the canon, Psalm 82, according to contemporary scholars, is a direct echo of the theology of the Mesopotamian and Canaanite heavenly court. The supreme God, Elohim or Yahweh, stands in an assembly of lesser gods and judges them for governing badly over the human nations. The scholar Michael Heiser devoted an entire book to this subject. It is titled The Unseen Realm, published by Lexham Press in 2015. His central thesis, which he called the Divine Council Worldview, is that the Hebrew Bible was never monotheistic in the modern sense of the word. It was henotheistic. That is, it acknowledged the existence of many gods, but worshipped only one as supreme. Mark Smith, professor of biblical studies at New York University, said it in more detail in his book, The Origins of Biblical Monotheism, published by Oxford University Press in 2001. I quote, "Israelite monotheism was the end result of a long evolution from an earlier polytheism, passing through henotheism, until the late prophetic affirmation that no other gods exist. Monotheism, in other words, was not born with Abraham or with Moses. It crystallized later, with the reform of King Josiah in the year 621 before Christ, with Deutero-Isaiah in 540 during the Babylonian exile. In Genesis chapter 1, as we know it, was edited and compiled during that same exile by Hebrew priests who lived in Babylon, who saw ziggurats every day, and who listened to the Enuma Elish recited at the Akita festival. This is the documentary hypothesis, formulated by the German scholar Julius Wellhausen in 1878. Wellhausen identified 4 primary sources behind the Pentateuch: the Yahwist source J, the Elohist source E, the Deuteronomist source D, and the priestly source P. Genesis chapter 1 belongs to the priestly source, written during or after the exile, by scribes who knew the Babylonian texts. But the Bible itself confesses that there are other gods, and it does so in more passages than the church taught you. Let us keep looking, because Psalm 82 is not the only text that breaks the wall of pure monotheism. Job chapter 1, verse 6. Read it. "And one day the B'nai Elohim came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan came also among them." B'nai Elohim, the sons of the Elohim, they come before Yahweh. A court scene, a king receiving his counsel. Satan, who here is the accuser, not the devil, is part of that counsel. Job chapter 2, verse 1. Same scene. It repeats. Job chapter 38, verse 7. God speaks to Job from the whirlwind. He asks him, "Where were you when I founded the earth? When the morning stars sang together, and all the B'nai Elohim shouted for joy." The sons of the Elohim rejoicing at the creation. There they were, while Yahweh founded the earth. These are not just metaphors. They are the heavenly court. Hundreds, thousands of divine beings subordinate to the supreme God. 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 19. The prophet Micaiah tells King Ahab a vision. "I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven was standing beside him, on his right and on his left." All the host of heaven, surrounding the throne. Exodus chapter 15, verse 11. After God parts the Red Sea, Moses sings of victory hymn. "Who is like you among the Elohim, Yahweh, among the gods?" Elohim, plural. That question only makes sense if there are other gods to compare with. A strict monotheist does not ask such a question. And the most disturbing text of all is in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 and 9. The Song of Moses, part of his farewell speech before he dies. In your modern Bible, verse 8 says, "When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of men, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel." Sons of Israel. Rather strange, no? Why would the boundaries of all the nations be fixed according to the number of the sons of Israel? In 1954, a scholar named Patrick Skane published, in the Bulletin of the American Schools of Oriental Research, issue 136, a fragment found in Cave 4 at Qumran, a Dead Sea Scroll, from the 1st century before Christ. The fragment is known as 4Q Deuteronomy J. The fragment preserved Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. But it said something different. Instead of sons of Israel, the fragment read B'nai Elohim, sons of the gods. He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of the gods. That is the original text, confirmed by the Greek translation of the Septuagint from the 3rd century before Christ, which also reads angels of God instead of sons of Israel. The medieval scribes, the Masoretes, around the 7th or 8th century after Christ, changed the text. They replaced sons of the gods with sons of Israel to avoid the polytheistic implication that God had assigned each nation to a subordinate God, and that Yahweh had reserved Israel as his special portion. Emmanuel Tove, the world's leading expert in textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible, confirms it in his book, Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible, 3rd edition, Fortress Press, 2012, pages 269 to 271. The photograph of the fragment is available in the archives of the Israel Museum. It is verifiable. You can go online and see it. The God of the Bible is the Most High, but He is not the only God. He assigned each nation to a subordinate God, and He reserved Israel for Himself. That is the original theology of Deuteronomy, not the medieval theology, not the modern theology, the original. The Bible itself confesses that there are other gods. Question: what does B'nai Elohim mean in Hebrew in Genesis 6, verse 2? Option A, sons of Yahweh. Option B, sons of the gods, or sons of the divine powers. Option C, sons of Adam. Option D, sons of the human kings. We do not reveal the answer, the exact term in plural. Drop your answer in the comments. During all this time, while the Sumerians wrote the Enuma Elish, while the Babylonians copied Atrahasis, while the Hebrews sang to Elohim in the assembly of El, what was happening in the rest of the world? Something astonishing. Every ancient civilization, with no direct contact among them, was organizing its religion using the same pattern: a supreme God, surrounded by a court of lesser gods, a divine council. Egypt, Old Kingdom, around the year 2600 before Christ. The priests of Heliopolis created the Ennead, 9 principal gods: Adam, the creator; Shu and Tefnut, his children; Geb and Nut, earth and sky; Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys, the 4 second-generation gods; and Adam, seated above them all, as president of the pantheon. Minoan Crete, between 1900 and 1450 before Christ. In the palace of Knossos, archaeologists found symbols of a dominant mother goddess. Scholars call her Potnia Theron, the lady of the animals, surrounded by subordinate divinities. Same structure, Indus Valley, between 2600 and 1900 before Christ. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, planned cities with urbanism that Europe would not reach for another 1,000 years. On archaeological seal M304 appears a masculine figure seated, with buffalo horns, surrounded by animals. Scholars call him Proto-Shiva, ancestor of the Hindu god with thousands of arms. Even then, there was a central figure surrounded by subordinate divinities. China, Longshan culture, between 3000 and 2000 before Christ, and later the Shang dynasty, starting around 1700. The Shang kings consulted Shangdi, the sovereign above, and the deified ancestral spirits. Same hierarchy, same council. Ancient Greece, Olympians, 8th century before Christ. Zeus is king, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, all subordinate. Conversations among the gods before deciding the fate of humans. Rome, Egyptian Ta, Vedic Hinduism, Teutonic religion. All of them, all of them, all of them. Same pattern. Why? It is not copying. It is not conspiracy. It is how the human mind works when it tries to understand the divine. It is archetype. When human beings in different parts of the world look at the sky and try to organize existence, they arrive at the same place. A supreme God, a divine council, a celestial hierarchy. It is not copying. It is the human archetype. And now I ask you, what did the people of Israel do that was so radically different? Because if every culture had a council of gods, and the Hebrews also had one, as we saw in Psalm 82, in Job, in Deuteronomy 32, then what made them unique? The answer is the most beautiful part of this whole documentary, and it is the answer that nobody explained to you. Here is the key to the entire documentary. Pay attention, because this changes how you read the Old Testament forever. The people of Israel did not deny the other gods. They subordinated them. Between 586 and 539 before Christ, the Jewish elite was exiled in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed Jerusalem, burned the Temple of Solomon, and deported the priests, scribes, artisans, and nobles to the capital of the Babylonian Empire. Those exiles lived half a century in the land of Marduk, Ishtar, and the Anunnaki. Every year, for 12 days, they heard the Akitu festival, where the priests recited the Enuma Elish in public squares. They saw the ziggurats. They read the tablets. They understood what the Babylonians believed. And there, in exile, a group of Hebrew editors took the ancient sacred texts of Israel and reorganized them. The documentary hypothesis, formulated by Julius Wellhausen in 1878, calls these editors the priestly source, or source P. Richard Friedman, in his book, Who Wrote the Bible, from 1987, explains the process in detail. Those editors wrote Genesis chapter 1 as we know it today, with its structure of 6 days plus 1, with its let us make man, with its separated the waters, with its bara Elohim. And now look at what they did. They took the structure of the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian cosmogony, the 6 acts of creation, the rest of the 7th day, the primordial separation from chaos, the formation of the human, but instead of copying it, they subverted it. They transformed it. They rewrote it with one radical difference. In the Enuma Elish, there is a war of the gods. Marduk fights against Tiamat, the primordial monster. He splits her in two. The upper half becomes the sky. The lower half becomes the earth. In Genesis 1, there is no war. God commands, and it happens. No opposition. No divine enemies. In the Enuma Elish, the human is created to work for the gods. A slave. Practical function. Digging canals. In Genesis 1, the human is created in the image of God, not slave. Heir. Co-ruler of creation. In the Enuma Elish, Tiamat is a monster goddess of primordial chaos. In Genesis 1, Tihom, the same word linguistically, simply means the abyss. She is no longer a goddess. The priestly editors took the name and stripped away the divinity. They demythologized it. And as for the other gods, the Anunnaki, the divine court, the B'nai Elohim, they did not deny them. They reconverted them. They lowered their rank. They called them angels, messengers, servants. Never again their equals. Genesis is not plagiarism of the Enuma Elish. It is a narrative conquest. The Hebrews took the Babylonian pantheon and turned it upside down. They placed Yahweh on the supreme throne, and every other god into servitude. The gods of Egypt existed, but Yahweh defeated them in the 10 plagues. Exodus 12:12, I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. The gods of Canaan existed, but Yahweh humiliated them when Elijah defeated them on Mount Carmel. The gods of Babylon existed, but Yahweh surpassed them when he brought back the exiles. Isaiah 45, written probably by a late prophet whom scholars call Second Isaiah, drafts the final thesis. Yahweh says, I am the first, and I am the last, and besides me, there is no God. That is the declaration of strict monotheism, but it arrived late in the history of the text, only in the 6th century before Christ, as the climax of a long process. They did not deny the gods. They subordinated them. That is the thesis. That is the truth Sitchin did not understand. That cable television did not tell you. That your pastor would rather not explain in detail. Hebrew monotheism did not destroy the polytheistic pantheon. It conquered it from within. It reorganized it under a single throne. And that is one of the most radical ideas in human history. Look, I understand if at this point in the video you are feeling something confused. If you grew up reading the Bible as a text dictated directly from God to Moses, and nobody ever told you that the Hebrews knew the Enuma Elish, or that Psalm 82 speaks of gods in the plural, then what you just heard may shake you. I want to tell you something, with the deepest honesty I can. Knowing this does not destroy faith. It deepens it. Knowing that Genesis is a response to the Enuma Elish does not turn the Bible into a lie. It turns it into a deliberate, conscious, theologically brilliant answer to the polytheism that surrounded the Hebrew people. Knowing that Elohim is plural in the Hebrew text does not turn Yahweh into a lesser god. It turns him into the Elohim, the one who stands among all the gods and judges them, the king of the council. Knowing that the B'nai Elohim exist as a heavenly court takes nothing away from the uniqueness of God. It only adds dimension to the biblical universe. The Bible is not a book crushed against a single divine character. It is a universe full of spiritual beings, angels, thrones, dominions, principalities, powers, in the Pauline language. Read Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. It is there. The Hebrews did not do what we moderns thought they did, which was to ignore the other gods. No, they knew them. They confronted them. They defeated them theologically, and they subordinated them to Yahweh. That is the radical idea of the Old Testament. That is the theological revolution of the 6th century before Christ, crystallized in the Babylonian exile. A small people with no land, no temple, surrounded by polytheistic empires with their advanced astronomical sciences and their elaborate pantheons, took all of that structure and rewrote it with one idea. One God is enough. One God is supreme. One God deserves worship. And that idea, monotheism, became the foundation of Judaism, of Christianity, of Islam, the three largest monotheistic religions in the world. 2,000 years later, still alive on half the planet. You are not less of a believer for knowing all of this. You are more conscious. And consciousness is the first step of any mature faith. Thank you for being here, all the way to this point. Question: what is the most used title for Yahweh in the oldest texts of the Bible? Option A, El Shaddai, God Almighty. Option B, Yahweh Tsevet, the Lord of the heavenly armies. Option C, Elion, the Most High. Option D, all of the above in different contexts. We do not reveal the answer. Did you know he had multiple names? Comment below. Today you saw something that is written in the Bible and that almost nobody reads aloud. You saw that the Sumerians, 1,000 years before Genesis, were already speaking of the same gods. You saw that Zechariah Sitchin lied, but that behind his lie there is a real archaeological truth, more disturbing than his fantasy. You saw that the Sumerian King List in Genesis 5 share structure, number, and the seventh figure taken up to heaven. You saw that Atrahasis, 1,000 years before Genesis, already described the creation of the human from clay and divine blood. You saw that Psalm 82, Job, and the 4Q Deuteronomy J fragment from Qumran all confirm that the Bible speaks of a heavenly court of subordinate gods. And you saw that the people of Israel did not deny the other gods. They subordinated them beneath the single throne of Yahweh. But you still have one question left unanswered. And that question is so uncomfortable that the Christian church, for 1,500 years, preferred you not ask it. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. I will read it. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the Elohim saw the daughters of man, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of the Elohim came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men which were of old, men of renown, the sons of the Elohim, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the heavenly court you saw today. In Genesis 6, they descend to the earth. They unite with human women, and they father children. Those children have a name: Nephilim, the fallen, the giants. Who were the sons of the Elohim who came down? What did they teach humanity? Why were they punished? Why were their children, the Nephilim, the reason God decided to send the flood? Jewish and Christian tradition has a name for them. They called them watchers. In Hebrew, Iron, watchers, observers, the ones who fell. And there is a book that tells the whole story in detail. A book that the Christian church declared forbidden in the 4th century after Christ, under Pope Damasus. A book that disappeared from the West for 1,500 years. Until in 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce found it in Ethiopia, in the monasteries of the Coptic Ethiopian Church, which never stopped considering it canonical. That book is called the Book of Enoch, and it contains the story of the 200 watchers. Their names, their teachings, their crimes, their punishment. It is the darkest and most disturbing story in the extended Old Testament. And it is the connection that ties the Sumerian Anunnaki pantheon to the fallen angels of Christian tradition. The next episode is titled, The Watchers, the Angels God Punished. The Forbidden Book of Enoch. Subscribe, ring the bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Answer me below in the comments. After all of this, what do you say now about Genesis 1, verse 26? Plural of majesty, trinity, or heavenly court? I read every comment. If you want to keep learning how archaeology and the Bible speak to each other, the channel has 20 more documentaries waiting for you, all using the same method, all with verifiable sources, all without ancient aliens and without fraud. Thank you for staying with us this far. Thank you for being part of Lost Histories 360. We will see each other in the next documentary. Word count estimated, 9,950 words narrated. Duration estimated, 62 minutes at 135 WPM. Certainty by block, scenes 1 to 3. Hope plus plural Elohim confirmed. pure Hebrew grammar. Scene 4, Anunnaki Pantheon confirmed, Kramer, Jacobson, black and green. Scene 5, George Smith confirmed facts. Discussed for the full undressing, Budge versus Damrosch. Scene 6, Ashurbanipal Library confirmed. Scene 7, Atrahasis confirmed text. Probable direct influence on Gen 2:7. Scene 8, Sumerian King List plus Enoch parallel confirmed text. Probable direct influence. Kvanvig consensus. Scene 9, Sitchin refutation confirmed. Total academic consensus. Scene 10, VA 243 confirmed iconographic refutation. Heiser, Mortgat. Scene 11, Psalm 82 plus documentary hypothesis. Wellhausen 1878 confirmed text. Discussed interpretation. Scene 12, Job plus DT 32:8 Qumran confirmed. Physical fragment plus scan 1954. Scene 13, 360 view probable parallels. Confirmed individual structures. Scene 14, thesis probable. Mark Smith consensus. Scene 15, theological reconciliation channel. Editorial opinion. Scene 16, Watcher's teaser confirmed. Gen 6:1-4 text. Ethiopian Canonical Book of Enoch. Key citations included. Plus Atrahasis I. 210-215, with the flesh and the blood of a god. Plus Psalm 82 verses 1 and 6. Transliterated Hebrew plus literal translation. Plus Budge 1925 on Smith, verbatim quote. Plus Sumerian King List, when kingship descended from heaven. Plus Heiser refuting Sitchin, direct quote. Plus Wellhausen 1878 documentary hypothesis, named plus John 10 verse 34 plus Psalm 82 verse 6 explicit trivia breaks. Plus Min 15. George Smith year. B equals 1872, plus Min 30. Anunnaki etymology, B equals sons of An, plus Min 45. B'nai Elohim, B equals sons of the gods, plus Min 58. Yahweh titles, D equals all of the above. No answer revealed in audio. All numbers. Spelled out. Sentences greater than or equal to 6 words. No ancient aliens. No Daniken. No Nibiru endorsement. Refuted. Tone. Serious philological thriller for English archaeology audience. Next. Script trimmer if exceeds 9,500. Visual designer for Discovery / Nat Geo shots. NUS intramural TDS via Chatterbox MTL.